Good evening, good evening. This is Coach Steele, and you're here live with Coach Steele's Finance Training. And happy to have everybody here that can be here right now. Of course, I'm in the South, I'm in Georgia, and of course, Florida, Georgia, and a few other areas, Alabama, are dealing with the effects of a hurricane slash tropical storm. And so happy to have everyone here once again. I'm Coach Steele, and you're here with Coach Steele's Finance Training. And I do have power and I do have electricity right now. So I'm excited about that. And so normally I go live 9 a.m. Saturday, every Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time Zone. And of course, today it is Friday. So I may end up using this for the replay tomorrow morning, depending on what happens as far as electricity and everything else. So if you miss it today, you can catch it tomorrow morning. But happy to have each and every person tuned in, locked in on today. And our subject today is talking about, budgeting for emergencies. Of course, in the Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and actually a little South Carolina, we've all dealt with, a recent emergency with this hurricane. I believe it's called Helen, or anyway, whatever the name is, you can type it in. So I didn't get much sleep at all last night. Whew. So just like a lot of other people, as you're tuning in, whether you're live on YouTube, Coach Steele's Finance Training, make sure you go over there and subscribe to the YouTube channel, or whether you're tuning in live on Facebook right now. Many people don't have power. Some people don't have Wi-Fi, so they may be able to catch it tomorrow. And if the emergencies are still going on, then I may have to replay it on Monday. And hopefully by then, everyone will get a chance to see this. But when we talk about budgeting for emergencies, even in what we're dealing with right now with the hurricane, this is all the more reason why we need to plan as best as possible. Certain things you can plan for and prep for and have solutions. And then there's some things that are just completely out of our control. And of course, a lot of families yesterday, today, and over the weekend are dealing with a lot of things that are out of their control, the things that we can't handle, that are beyond our realm. And so definitely prayers out and love to each and every family that's dealing with a difficult time right now with this hurricane. I just driving around my area, I saw all type of trees. I saw trees on cars, trees on houses, water damage, all kind of stuff. Even my house took, some damage as well. And so this hurricane was no joke. And so that's why we have to do the best that we can to prep and plan so that we are able to control certain things on our end that are in our capability of controlling. And so I want to talk about budgeting for emergencies for today and different strategies and plans to budget for emergencies and how to put something in place if you don't have anything in place at all. And then we have some people, they do have a budget for emergencies. They do have certain things in place, but you may have put too much into place. And so you may have too much liquidity in place for an emergency, and you need to creatively allow that money to grow somewhere else. We'll deal with that a little bit as well. But definitely happy to have everybody tuned in on today as we talk about planning for emergencies and budgeting for emergencies. Hello to Yvette Steele, my beautiful wife. And so budgeting for the unexpected. And sometimes it comes with spending, it comes with, costs, things that we did not plan for. You know, even this morning, I found myself in line at Walmart. Some Walmarts were closed, some were open. And so I was in line at my local Walmart, and they were almost treating it kind of like COVID, where only they were letting people in the store kind of like two by twos. It was like trying to get into the ark, except no animals. And so they would let a few people out the store, let a few people in the store. And then they were limiting everyone on how much you could get. You could only get one bag of ice. And of course, majority of the water was completely gone. And so good evening to you, Shauna Johnson. Happy to have you on this evening. And so in those moments, if we plan properly as best as possible, then that's less that we have to get at the store at the last minute. That's less things that we're grabbing that aren't in our budget. And so, seeing different people and their different situations that they were in, they were having to make last minute financial adjustments due to the emergency that we were dealing with because of the hurricane and the tropical storm and other variables that were in play for different people. And so, if you have your budget set up long term and short term, then emergencies like this don't have such a dangerous effect on you. But if you don't prep and have your budget and plan for these emergencies and certain funds set to the side for situations like we deal with in the South when these hurricane seasons come, then it can throw your budget off completely. It can throw your finances off completely, and it can set you back. And that's what I want to deal with today because I want to help people not get set back. We already know through Coach Steele's finance training and other videos we have on YouTube, we've looked at the data and we see that most Americans, 66 to 70%, are living paycheck to paycheck. And so if you're living paycheck to paycheck, it also lends to the fact that we are not prepared as a whole for emergencies. If you're already paycheck to paycheck, a majority of Americans, if an emergency comes, then that's not good. Because now you are no longer living paycheck to paycheck. You're now having more expenses come in than you have cash, than you have income. And so that puts us in the red. So what you want to do when you're prepping and planning for emergency, now some people will say, for you to set the target amount. And so we have that as an option. But what is that target amount and what should your target amount look like? Now, the average financial advisor may tell you to have 3 to 6 months set to the side for emergencies. Now, for some people, I believe 6 months is a little extreme. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing to have the extra, but I don't think I would have just 6 months of liquidity just sitting around, maybe 2 to 3 months, and the other 3 months / 4 months of that money, I probably would put somewhere to where it can produce or work for me and produce some cash or maybe potentially some passive income. Because having funds sit around, they can lose value lose spending power because of inflation. So anyway, set your target amount 3 to 6 months, and keep in mind when we hear set, target amount 3 to 6 months worth of expenses, whatever your expenses are, you want to set 3 to 6 months of that amount. Whatever your monthly expenses are, you want to set 3 to 6 months of that to the side. So for example, let's say your total expenses for the month are $3,000 or $6,000. Well, 3 times 3 is 9,000. 3 times 6,000 is $18,000. So depending on what your monthly expenses amount are, you want to multiply that times 3 or potentially times 6. And that's how much you want sitting in your savings. I think 6 is extreme for certain people. Now, if you have contract work and you don't know it's not consistent, then I think 6 months is fair. Now, the average person is usually working a 9 to 5 job. And so if the average person is working a 9 to 5 job, let's say they lose their job or their pay is cut in half or they have to go on some type of short-term disability and they lose a portion of their income or all of it, whatever scenario you're in, then having those 3 months is good. Potentially having those 6 months, that's a good situation. But think about this. There are some people that are retired, or there are some people that have a pension or people who make passive income. Their situation is completely different because no matter what happens every month, that money is still coming in. And so when the average person loses their 9 to 5, usually the money stops and they need that full amount until they go find the next job. And so that's why I say scenarios are different, because if someone's retired, then they still have the money coming in no matter what. So 6 months may be a little extreme. So hopefully that makes sense there. Now, when it comes to planning for that emergency amount that you need, I would start off with the basics and then build from there. So let's say your monthly expenses are $5,000 a month. But out of that $5,000, let's say 1,000 of it is because of, I don't know, cable, and a bunch of subscriptions and things like that. So if your monthly expenses are $5,000 a month, but 1,000 of it is from things that you just don't need at all, it's just extra, then I would probably, in that case, I wouldn't save $5,000 for each of those 3 months. I would save $4,000. So I would do 4,000 times three, which is 12,000. I would start there. And then when I can build it up more, maybe I would build it up more to that $15,000 range. Because if an emergency comes, if someone loses their job, whatever the case may be, I'm cutting off all of those unnecessary subscriptions that I don't need anyway. I'm getting rid of those. I'll get rid of cable. I'm not going to sit home if I'm unemployed and I can't work. I'm going to be out looking for a job anyway. YouTube is free. I'm going to make the adjustments. I will get rid of what I need to get rid of so that my emergency fund can last me and sustain me until I find another job. And so you have to figure out what are those things that you don't need in those moments. That way you can have an emergency fund that can last you. Someone may have an emergency fund of 3 months, but if they look at the things that they really don't need, that emergency fund might last you 4 months as opposed to 3. So keep that in mind. And the main things you want to make sure you really save for is shelter. So you want to make sure that you can pay that rent, that mortgage payment for your shelter. You want to make sure that you can pay for your transportation, gas, fuel, everything that comes with, your vehicle. You want to make sure you have funds for that because that's how you're going to potentially get around. Some people do work from home, but that's how you're going to potentially get around. And of course, for emergencies, you want transportation as well. And then, of course, you also want to save for utilities. That's important as well. We want to be able to have electricity. We want to be able to have water, things like that to be able to stay clean. And of course, water to drink as well. So shelter, utilities, transportation, and of course, food. We want to be able to have funds for food. We got to eat. And so those are the four main. The fifth one I would say is if you have certain medical situations, and let's say you have medication that you need every month or day to day, then make sure you have in your emergency fund money set aside for you to still be able to manage and pay for whatever you need medically as well. So that is just as vital as those other ones. So make sure you keep those in mind. When you look at your emergency fund, does it cover your shelter expenses, utilities, transportation, food, and medical? And so usually there's four main things that you need. Good evening, Tasha Smith. Happy to have you tuning in on today with Coach Steele's Finance Training. And I know, Tasha, you and Mr. Rich have been going without power as well. Don't know if y'all have power now. Our power was out pretty much a majority. Oh, Lord. Last night, I can't remember. I think I got 2 hours of sleep and then I woke up. And then, of course, we know certain people. We know how we are. If it gets too hot, ain't no going to sleep. And so I got up and I think I was up the rest of the night. So I didn't get much sleep at all. I stayed up brainstorming, planning, and making adjustments and all that good stuff. And we have upstairs and downstairs. So, of course, it's cooler downstairs. So we all moved downstairs to make sure we were cooler while everything went out. All right. So next step. So we save for those 4/5 vital things, and then we add it up. Add up what the shelter, utilities, travel, food, and medical are. Figure out what those costs are. Of course, multiply that times 3, and at minimum how much you need for your emergency fund, especially for someone with a 9-to-5 job. If you lose that income, then you need that coming in. That gives you at least 3 months to get back on your feet, find another job, another opportunity, cash flow and opportunity, find more income while being able to maintain the household, the bare minimums. It's okay. Certain things you can go without, like I mentioned before. Also, um, another thing that you have to do when we talk about that money is, most importantly, you have to start saving it. You have to creatively start saving it. Now, some people, they may have 50,000, 80,000, whatever it is, 40,000 sitting in their savings account. And so you really don't have to start saving. So there's some people, they don't have to start saving, but they don't know how much their emergency fund should be. And like I said, on average, some people say 3 to 6 months. So you only need 3 to 6 months of whatever those monthly expenses are. Once again, if your monthly expenses are only $5,000, your emergency fund, all you need is maybe $15,000. But what if that person is retired and they have a pension coming in? So they still have money coming in even in an emergency. So 6 months is probably an extreme for them, like I mentioned before. All right, so we want to save that money. Now, for the person that doesn't have that money available, then what you have to do is start being disciplined. It causes for you to have a whole nother scenario. And so I'll get to that in 2 seconds. The person that may have 40,000, 50,000, 80,000 in their savings, you may only need 15 or 20,000 for emergency. The rest of that $20,000 or $60,000, you could actually invest in something that creates more cash flow opportunities for you or passive income, so you can really put those funds to work. That way, the money is not losing spending power. That's a lot of money to be losing spending power every single year because inflation, especially if it's just sitting in a regular checking account, or if it's just sitting in a regular savings account. And one thing that you can do is always put your money in a high yield interest savings account. That's what I would do. That's one of the creative things you can do. And in the notes section, I don't think I have it in the chat. I have a link for a high yield interest savings account. Now, of course, I can't. I'll put it on Facebook later. I'll put it on the Facebook section later. That way you can get a high yield interest savings account if you're interested. High yield interest savings accounts are making probably anywhere between 4.5%, sometimes a little over 5%. That way the money isn't just sitting there not making money, but will actually make something monthly. All right. So if you don't have that $15,000, that $20,000 available, then you need to go through your budget and see what you have left over at the end of every month and take a small portion of that, whether you need to put it on auto. That way you can set it and forget it, whether you have $50 left over every month, or if you have $100 left over at the end of every month. You want to be able to take those funds and set them off to the side to a separate account, out of sight, out of mind, and start building up that emergency fund. Start building up that 3 to 6 months, or potentially some people 2 months worth of emergencies. And so, but you want to start, I would say start with at least 2 months and work your way to 3. You have to start somewhere. We have to have some type of starting point. And so take those funds at the end of every month and set them off to the side in some type of savings account, separate account, high yield interest savings account. So not only are you growing that emergency fund by sitting your money over there, but guess what? If it's a high yield interest savings account, it's collecting interest and compound interest. So therefore, you are growing that account, but the account is growing itself as well, because you're making money in the process. And so you don't have to do all the building for 3 months. If you need $5,000 in there, if you need $12,000 in there, whatever the amount is, if that account is collecting interest and is growing through compound interest, then you won't have to come up with all the funds yourself. Your money will do some of the work for you with getting to reaching that objective and that goal. So once again, you can set it and forget it and have it auto draft out. That way you're not overthinking the process and have those funds go out. But there is order, there is structure. I will say this: if you have uh, a bunch of consumer debt, if you have outstanding credit card balances, I would get rid of that debt first. I would work on clearing up, getting rid of that debt and attacking it before rushing to save 6 months worth of money, 4 months worth of money, because that debt is going to eat up all of those funds. So we want to get rid of that debt first before we just go stack up a bunch of bread in a savings account. All right. So it's important that you do set money to the side for emergencies. It is a habit, unfortunately, in America where a lot of people, the stats say a lot of Americans, maybe about 40% of Americans, can't even handle a $400 emergency. A $400 emergency might throw them off completely. And so that's something else we have to be careful of and pay attention to, because life does happen. Those emergencies are going to come. I did have an article about it. I don't know if I'll be able to pull it up right now. Let me look real quick and see. Yep, I found it. And I'll share this with you real quick.
Order Pizza Hut now and get a free large pizza later. Add a free pizza on your next order, so you can pizza now, then pizza again.
Let's see. All right, I'm not able to make it much bigger. I thought I was going to be able to enlarge it, but it says 40% of Americans don't have $400 in the bank for emergency expenses, according to the Federal Reserve. Almost 40% of American adults won't be able to cover a $400 emergency with cash savings or a credit card charge that they could quickly pay off, a Federal Reserve survey finds. And so about 27% of those surveyed would need to borrow the money or sell something to come up with the 400, and an additional 12% would not be able to cover it all. So it's interesting when we look at that, and I will stop sharing that real quick. It's interesting when you look at that many people just aren't prepared for emergencies. So this is important. This is something that we need to take those funds and set it to the side, because if we can't handle a $400 emergency, most emergencies or unexpected things end up being a little more than $400. Tires on a car or car repair, all of that stuff, those costs are going up over time. And so, for people to do repairs and things like that, parts cost more, labor costs more because of inflation. So we have to really be prepared for emergencies that are more than $400. And if that is going to throw your budget off and it's going to set you back, and what we end up finding is a lot of people are having to put that emergency on credit. And that's what I call it, putting that emergency on credit. And by putting that emergency on credit, now your emergency is going to be way more expensive than what it originally was, because that credit card is going to charge you interest on that balance. And so if the emergency was $1,000, credit card company is charging you 20% interest, 26% interest. It's no longer $1,000 emergency. That emergency might end up costing you $2,000, depending on how long it takes you to pay that back. And so that's why I want to discuss having the funds, the liquidity, the liquid cash available to take care of those emergencies, as opposed to just rushing to pay the emergency on a credit card or through a loan, because it costs you more in the long run and it creates a habit. That's the most dangerous thing, is putting these emergencies on credit creates a habit of depending on credit to pay for things. And when you create that habit and that dependency on using that credit card or a loan, anytime something happens, then you are building up a financial problem. You're building up a mountain of financial problems over a period of time, because the routine is to tap into that emergency, not from your liquidity and your cash from being disciplined and saving to pay for it, but through those credit cards. And those credit cards are not your friends. For most people, the credit card is not your friend. Some people do have discipline and they use them well, and they pay them off before the charge date, before the end of every month or whatever that date is. And so they're not paying interest on those cards. And so it doesn't pile up on them. But the average person are struggling to manage and maintain discipline with those credit cards. And so we want to develop a habit of being able to take care of our emergency with our liquidity from saving our money. Now, of course, if you have an emergency, you use the card and the next day or two or a couple of days later, you pay it off in full, then okay, you use the card for emergency, but you use your liquidity to pay it off fast enough. So that's not a bad thing. You may rack up reward points or hotel points or mileage or cashback rewards. But we want to end the habit of putting our emergencies on credit because it's going to cost you more than what it's worth. And when you do use that liquidity, let's say you had an emergency and you use your savings, that 3 to 6 months, that 2 months worth of money you had set to the side in that high yield interest savings account. And if you want to learn about a good high yield interest savings account, go to my YouTube channel, Coach Steele's Finance Training, or look down in the description on this video. And the high yield interest savings account, the name of a bank and that link will be in the description on this. Actually, it's on YouTube. It's on Facebook as well. If you look into the information about what we're talking about, it's actually on Facebook as well. So on YouTube and Facebook, you can click the link and find a good high yield interest savings account. I believe right now they're doing at least about 4.5%. There's some other perks as well. They have some other incentives and bonuses where they're giving like $300 away, but you have to meet those requirements. So it's free money. And so I'm going to make sure I get that $300 that they're giving. I'm going to meet that requirement, and I'm going to get that 4.5% as well. What does that mean? It makes it easier to build up that emergency fund. So if a bank is going to incentivize you for signing up and paying you extra for a certain thing, let's say you're starting out at ground zero and you don't have an emergency fund. Well, if you meet certain qualifications and they give you $300 or $400, you're already on your way to building up that emergency fund. So you have to be able to use these bank incentives and bonuses and everything else that they have to your advantage to create what you need. It doesn't mean you have to stay with the bank forever. I'm temporarily doing what I need to do to get this free money from this bank. You don't have to be loyal to a bank. Banks are not loyal to us. So you do what you need to do with that financial institution to accomplish your goal. And if you need to move on from that point, then you move on from that point. But we want to build up those emergency funds and preferably put them in a high yield interest savings account. Some people like to put the funds in a CD, but high yield interest savings accounts are actually giving just as much interest. You can get just as much interest and profit in a high yield interest savings account as a CD, or potentially more in a high yield interest savings account. So it might be more beneficial just to set it up in a high yield interest savings account. Plus, on top of that, a CD, the money is set to the side. You cannot touch it. It comes with penalties if you pull it out. High yield interest savings account, you still have access to those funds. And you're still making just as much, if not more money, by putting your money to work in there. So I definitely prefer high yield over CDs. But anyway, once again, didn't want to stay too long. I know a lot of people don't have power. A lot of people don't have Wi-Fi, don't have internet. But I want to put this video out. And of course, I will replay it tomorrow, depending on what's going on with the power and electricity in my area and the internet. So that way people can listen to this and remember to budget for emergencies. It is important. It is vital. We have to budget for emergencies, especially in the South, because there's a domino effect of things that happen. You know, during the summer, all the way up to November, we deal with this hurricane season. So we have this bad weather and we're rushing to the store for this, rush to the store for that, gas for generators, or just buying a generator in general, whether it's big or small. All of these adjustments that have to take place, whether it's water, whether it's ice, okay, now we have to travel, we have to leave. Keep that in mind. You may have to leave, and when you leave out of town, you may need a hotel if you can't get to a family member's house. And so Once again, if you have to get a hotel, that's an extra $100, $200, $300 you didn't plan for, that you may have had to stay in that hotel for a couple of days due to what's going on locally when an emergency happens. So there's so many things that you can budget for, and there's so many creative ways to plan for it. And I'll probably come back and do another video about that, because there's a way to budget and plan for it to where maybe if an emergency happens, your hotel costs won't cost you anything. If you're being strategic with the credit card and paying it off at the end of every month properly or before that charge date without having to pay any interest, you might be racking up a whole lot of hotel reward points. So therefore, if you did have to rush and travel out of town, you already have your hotel expenses paid for and covered. And so there are so many different creative ways to plan and prep for emergencies that can save you a lot of money without even costing you money to prep for. You can start financially planning for emergencies or having to go out of town without having to spend any money that you were already going to spend anyway. So once again, that's just one example of something that I do is I rack up a whole lot of hotel reward points, but I do not pay any interest on those cards because I don't want to give the credit card companies any money. I don't advise that for everyone because everyone does not have credit card discipline. So one thing I don't have to worry about usually is if I go out of town, I know I have probably at least 2, maybe 3 days worth of hotel points. So that's just one expense I don't worry about. Let me get some points on me. All right. So other than that, guys, I don't want to stay too long. It's been about 30, almost 37 minutes that I've been on. I made sure I covered everything, but we can creatively build this emergency fund for things that we need in times of emergencies, especially in the South. But there's emergencies, throughout our country all over. California deals with their natural disasters, up north in New York and other places, they have snow and all kind of other stuff they deal with. So this information is good for anybody, no matter where you are. Make sure you like, subscribe, share this content and information, and make sure that you start prepping for your emergencies, start budgeting for those emergencies. It's pretty simple. Like I said, we set the target amount. We figure out what that target amount is for those 3 months. Some people say 6 months, whatever that range is for you, 3 months, 6 months, 2 months, set that target amount. You do that quickly by finding how much you spend on shelter, which is rent/mortgage, how much you spend on utilities, electric, gas, water, how much you spend on transportation, fuel, your car insurance, whatever it is with your vehicle, and how much you spend on medical stuff. We want to make sure that we have our medicine and whatever else you need during emergencies, because that's life or death as well. Calculate all of that up, multiply it times 3 if you want 3 months worth of emergencies, multiply that amount times 6 if you want 6 months. And then now you know how much you need to start saving. If you already have it, set that amount in a high yield interest savings account. If you don't have it, we start plugging away at it to build it up, whether we do it on auto or whether we manually do it every month. We take money that's left over at the end of every month and we start building it up as fast as possible. Some people, you may just need a part-time job for maybe 3 months, a few months to have that emergency fund. It may be something you do seasonal. Boom, I have my emergency fund, and now I can disconnect from that part-time job and go mind my business, go back to doing what I'm doing. And so just keep that in mind as well. Also mention we want to clear up a lot of consumer debt. We have outstanding consumer debts. We want to clear that up before we start just throwing money to the side for emergencies as well. And don't use, if possible, try not to use credit cards for emergencies that you can't pay off, because then they will just build up over a period of time. Remember, many Americans don't have $400, don't have money for $400 worth of emergencies. That's not good. If you do use it, rebuild it for the next emergency that can potentially come. Other than that, I appreciate everybody tuning in. We're about to hit the 40-minute mark. Make sure you go to Coach Steele's Finance Training on YouTube, subscribe. Make sure you also share this information. If you're on Facebook, it's under my name, Simon Steele. Make sure you're following me on Facebook as well. I do post videos throughout the week on YouTube. So if you subscribe to YouTube, you'll catch all those other videos and content that come out as well. I appreciate everybody from tuning in. Be blessed. I'm keeping everyone in my prayers that are going through a difficult time right now with this hurricane in the Florida, Georgia, Alabama area. And I think South Carolina got a little rain as well. So definitely in my prayers. A lot of accidents, incidents, trees falling. Be safe, be patient, take your time, check on your loved ones, and help out anyone that you can potentially help out as well.